Drop it. Get on the ground now. Hands behind your back.
Officer, the tire is flat. My hands are empty. I am not a...
Turn around. You're being detained.
My name is Marcus Thorne, City Legal Director. Your body cam is on. This is an unlawful detention.
The scene was surreal. A 54-year-old man in pressed slacks and a polo shirt kneeling next to a deflated tire being treated like an armed felon. Marcus Thorne watched the officer's face. He saw the adrenaline, the dilated pupils, the sweat beading on the young man's forehead. He saw the lack of assessment. Braden wasn't looking at the flat tire. He wasn't looking at the hazard lights blinking rhythmically against the bright afternoon sun. He was looking at a black man holding a heavy metal object in a neighborhood where he decided Marcus didn't belong. "Officer," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave, steady and authoritative, the voice he used when addressing the city council. "My name is Marcus Thorne. I am the Director of Legal Affairs for this municipality. My identification is in the glove box. The car is registered to the city. If you escalate this further, you will be violating the Fourth Amendment, and you will be doing so without qualified immunity because the situation clearly does not warrant this level of force." "Shut up! Turn around, hands behind your back!" Braden advanced, pulling his taser. Marcus didn't flinch. He slowly placed the lug wrench on the ground and stood up, dusting off his knees. He didn't turn around. He looked Officer Braden directly in the eye. "I am standing. My hands are empty. I am not a threat. But understand this, your body camera is blinking. Every word you say, every command you give that lacks reasonable suspicion is being recorded. And I assure you, I will be the one reviewing that footage first thing Monday morning." But before we see exactly how Officer Braden destroys his entire life in the next 10 minutes, I need you to do something for me. If you believe that no one is above the law, and that includes the people wearing badges, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Drop a like on this video if you think citizens deserve respect. This story is about to show you exactly what happens when arrogance meets authority. You don't want to miss the fallout. Marcus Thorne was a man of routine and precision. At 54, he had built a life on the bedrock of the law. He didn't believe in shortcuts. He believed in statutes, precedents, and the rigorous application of justice. He had started as a public defender, grinding through the system for pennies before moving to the city attorney's office. Over 25 years, he had climbed the ladder rung by rung until he sat at the top. He was the shield for the city. When a sidewalk cracked and someone tripped, Marcus handled it. When a contract dispute threatened to stall a construction project, Marcus smoothed it over. And when police officers stepped out of line, Marcus was the one who calculated the liability. He was a man who respected the uniform because he knew how difficult the job was. He had defended plenty of good officers who had made honest mistakes in split-second situations. But he had no patience for bullies. That Sunday had been perfect. He had taken his Jaguar XJ, a retirement gift to himself, a few years early out, for a spin to clear his head before a heavy week of budget hearings. He was driving through the Highlands, a neighborhood of sprawling estates and oak trees, when the telltale thump-thump-thump of a blowout shuddered through the steering wheel. It was an annoyance, nothing more. Marcus pulled over to a safe spot on the wide shoulder, engaged his hazard lights, and got to work. He didn't call 8AA. He was a man who took pride in self-sufficiency. He took off his suit jacket, folded it neatly on the passenger seat, and retrieved the jack and lug wrench from the trunk. He was loosening the lug nuts, focusing on the task, enjoying the physical labor, when the siren chirped behind him. Officer Kyle Braden was 28 years old and had been on the force for 4 years. He was known in the precinct as a charger, an officer who loved the action, who looked for trouble where there wasn't any. He had received a call from dispatch about a suspicious person report. A neighbor, likely peering through blinds 3 streets over, had called in about someone loitering near driveways. The description was non-existent, just a male. When Braden turned the corner and saw the silver Jaguar with a black man kneeling beside it, his brain didn't register motorist in distress. It registered suspect. He didn't see the flat tire. He didn't see the hazard lights. He saw a man who didn't fit his image of the Highlands holding a metal bar. Bias is a funny thing. It acts like a filter, stripping away context and leaving only fear and aggression. Braden slammed his cruiser into park and didn't even check the license plate. If he had, he would have seen the municipal government tags. He would have seen the official business designation. But he didn't check. He just opened his door and started screaming. The disconnect was immediate, Marcus would later write in his statement. I was engaged in a mundane act of vehicle maintenance. The officer was engaged in a high-risk felony stop. We were in two different realities. The problem was, he was the one with the gun. Officer, Marcus tried again, keeping his hands raised to shoulder height, palms open. You are making a detention. For a detention to be lawful, you need reasonable suspicion that a crime has been, is being, or is about to be committed. I am changing a flat tire. That is not a crime. Please tell me what specific crime you suspect me of. Braden's face was flushed red. He wasn't used to people talking back like this. He was used to fear. He was used to, yes, sir, and sorry, sir. This man's vocabulary, detention, reasonable suspicion, lawful, felt like an insult. It felt like a challenge to his authority. You're acting belligerent, Braden spat out, stepping closer. I'm investigating a report of a suspicious person in the area. You fit the description. What description? Marcus pressed his voice, calm but sharp as a razor. Did the report describe a man in a polo shirt fixing a Jaguar? Did it describe a flat tire? Or did it just describe a black man? Stop arguing with me. I need to see ID, now. I would be happy to provide it, Marcus said. As I told you, my wallet is in the glove compartment. I am going to move to the passenger door and retrieve it. Don't you move, Braden yelled, his hand dropping to the grip of his pistol. You stay right there. If you reach for that car, I will drop you. It was the classic catch-22, a trap Marcus had seen in hundreds of case files. Show me your ID, but if you move to get your ID, I will shoot you for reaching. It was a logic loop designed to force non-compliance. If Marcus didn't produce the ID, he was refusing to identify. If he went to get it, he was reaching for a weapon. Officer, Marcus said, keeping his body perfectly still. You have created a situation where compliance is impossible. You are ordering me to produce identification while simultaneously ordering me not to move. This is a violation of Department Policy Section 402.1 regarding citizen contacts. I am asking you to call your supervisor. Call a sergeant to the scene. Now. I don't need a sergeant to handle a resisting suspect, Braden sneered. He was losing control of the interaction, and he knew it. The man wasn't scared. The man was lecturing him. And that made Braden feel small. It made him feel stupid. And a man like Kyle Braden would burn the world down before he let a suspect make him feel stupid. I'm not resisting, Marcus said. I am explaining the law to you. And I am telling you for your own sake, look at the tire. Just look down. It is flat. The jack is under the frame. Use your eyes, son. Don't let your prejudice drive this car off the cliff. The word son snapped something in Braden. He holstered his taser and reached for his handcuffs. That's it. You're done. Turn around. Marcus Thorne had a choice. He could physically resist, which would get him tased or shot, and would give the officer a legal defense later. Or he could submit, allow the violation to happen, and then use the full weight of the legal system to crush the department. He was a chess player. He knew that sometimes you have to lose a pawn to take the king. I am complying, Marcus said loudly for the benefit of the body camera and the neighbors who had started to gather on their porches. He saw Mrs. Gable from the Homeowners Association standing by her hedges holding her phone up. Good. Witnesses. I am turning around. I am placing my hands behind my back. I am doing this under duress and in protest of an unlawful arrest. Braden grabbed Marcus's wrists and twisted them roughly behind his back. The steel cuffs ratcheted tight, too tight. You're under arrest, Braden panted, the adrenaline still coursing through him. For what charge? Marcus asked. His cheek was pressed against the hot metal of the Jaguar's roof where Braden had shoved him. "Disorderly conduct," Braden said, "and failure to obey a lawful order, and resisting. Those are catch-all charges," Marcus said, his voice muffled but distinct. "They are the charges officers use when they have no actual probable cause. You are arresting me because I bruised your ego. And I want you to remember this moment, officer. I want you to remember the feeling of these cuffs on my wrists, because you are going to trade places with me sooner than you think. Shut up. Get in the car." Braden hauled Marcus away from his vehicle, leaving the Jaguar jacked up on the side of the road, the trunk open, the tools scattered. He shoved the city legal director into the back of the patrol unit. The back seat of a police cruiser is designed to be dehumanizing. It is hard plastic, cramped, and smells of old sweat and disinfectant. Marcus sat awkwardly, his shoulders aching from the position of his arms. He closed his eyes and began to breathe deeply. He wasn't panicking. He was working. He was building the file in his head. Time of stop, 2:15 p.m. Officer name, Braden. Badge number. I didn't get it, but I have his face. Refusal to acknowledge the flat tire. Refusal to allow access to ID. Excessive force in cuffing. Use of son as a trigger for escalation. This is a textbook Section 1983 violation. Braden got into the driver's seat. He didn't look back at his prisoner. He just put the car in gear and peeled away, leaving the hazard lights of the Jaguar blinking a silent warning to no one. The drive to the precinct took 15 minutes. It was a silent drive. Braden had turned off his radio, likely trying to calm his own nerves. He was starting to come down from the adrenaline spike, and the nagging voice of doubt was beginning to whisper. Why was the guy so calm? Why did he know the penal codes? But Braden pushed the thoughts away. The guy was probably a jailhouse lawyer, some ex-con who spent his time in the library, learning just enough to be annoying. That had to be it. They pulled into the rear sally port of the 4th Precinct. This was the irony that almost made Marcus smile. The 4th Precinct was the flagship station. It was where the chief had his secondary office. It was where Marcus came every other Wednesday for risk management meetings. He knew the layout of the building better than Braden did. He knew that the keypad code to the back door had been changed 3 weeks ago because he had authorized the memo. Braden hauled Marcus out of the car. "Let's go. Move." They walked through the heavy steel doors and into the processing area. It was a sterile room with concrete floors and a high booking desk. Behind the desk sat Sergeant Frank Miller. Frank was 58, a relic of the old guard, but a good man. He was close to retirement. He was drinking coffee and reading a sports magazine when the door buzzed. He didn't look up immediately. "What do you got, Braden? Another loiterer?" Frank asked, his voice bored. "Disorderly and resisting," Braden said, puffing out his chest. "Guy wouldn't listen, acting aggressive." "Name?" Frank asked, finally looking up over his reading glasses. "Refused to ID," Braden said. "John Doe, for now." Frank looked at the man in handcuffs. He looked at the polo shirt. He looked at the face. He blinked. He took his glasses off and rubbed his eyes, then looked again. The color drained from Frank's face so fast it looked like he'd been shot. Oh, sweet Jesus," Frank whispered. He stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. "What?" Braden asked, confused. Frank ignored him. He came around the desk, moving faster than he had in years. "Mr. Thorne, sir, is that you?" Marcus nodded politely. "Hello, Frank. How are the grandkids?" Braden looked between them, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. You know this guy, Sarge." Frank turned on Braden with a look of pure horror mixed with fury. "Know him, you idiot. This is Marcus Thorne. He's the city legal director. He's the head of the legal department. He's the man who represents the police chief." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a man. Braden looked at Marcus. He looked at the cuffs. He looked back at Frank. He said he was a lawyer, Braden stammered. I thought he was lying. He's not a lawyer, you moron, Frank hissed. He's the lawyer. He's the city's lawyer. Panic in a police station is a unique thing. It's not loud screaming. It's hushed, frantic urgency. It's the sound of careers dying. Get those cuffs off him, Frank barked. Right now. Hold on, Frank, Marcus said, his voice cool. Do not remove these handcuffs. Frank froze. Sir, if you take them off, you tamper with the evidence of the arrest condition, Marcus said. I want the watch commander down here. I want Lieutenant Harris. And I want him to see me exactly as Officer Braden brought me in. I want the full picture documented. Call Harris, Frank told Braden. Now. Braden was shaking. He fumbled for his radio. LT to processing. Urgent. 2 minutes later, Lieutenant Harris burst through the doors. He was a sharp political officer who knew exactly which way the wind blew. When he saw Marcus Thorne in handcuffs standing next to a terrified-looking Kyle Braden, he looked like he might vomit. Director Thorne, Harris said, walking over with his hands raised in apology. Sir, I don't know what happened here, but we are going to fix it immediately. Braden, uncuff him. I advised Sergeant Frank to wait for you, Marcus said. I want you to see this lieutenant. I want you to see your officer's judgment in physical form. I was changing a tire. I identified myself. I was arrested for disorderly conduct because I asked for a supervisor. Harris turned to Braden. His eyes were cold, dead things. Is that true? You arrested the legal director for a flat tire. He was resisting LT. He wouldn't show ID. Because you wouldn't let me get it, Marcus corrected. You told me if I moved, you would drop me. Harris closed his eyes for a second, rubbing his temples. Uncuff him. Now. That is an order. Braden fumbled with the key. His hands were trembling so badly he dropped it once. When the cuffs finally clicked open, Marcus rubbed his wrists. There were deep red indentations. I need water, Marcus said. And I need a conference room. I am not going to the cells, obviously, but I am not leaving either. Anything you need, sir, Harris said. He turned to Braden. Give me your gun and your badge. Go sit in the break room. Do not speak to anyone. Do not text anyone. You are relieved of duty pending an immediate internal review. Braden placed his gun and shield on the booking desk. He looked small now. The uniform looked like a costume he didn't know how to wear. He walked away, shoulders slumped into the back hallway. Sir? Harris said to Marcus. Please accept my deepest apologies. The chief is on his way. We can make this right. Lieutenant, Marcus said, adjusting his cuffs. You can't make this right. You can only make it legal. I'm not here for an apology. I'm here for the paperwork. Marcus sat in the conference room, a bottle of water untouched in front of him. He had his phone out. He didn't call his wife yet. He didn't want to worry her until he was home. He called the city manager. David, Marcus said when the line picked up. It's Marcus. We have a problem. What kind of problem? Budget. Liability. Significant liability. I'm currently at the 4th precinct. Are you helping with a case on a Sunday? No, David. I was the case. I was just arrested by one of our officers. There was a long silence on the other end. Excuse me. False arrest, excessive force, unlawful detention, racial profiling. I was handcuffed for changing a tire on my own car. I'm going to need you to authorize outside counsel for the city. I obviously cannot represent the department in this matter, as I will be the plaintiff. Marcus, tell me you're joking. I wish I were. I need the body cam footage secured immediately. I want the dash cam. I want the dispatch logs. I'm triggering a litigation hold on all data related to Officer Kyle Braden. By the time the police chief arrived, the station was in lockdown mode. The chief, a man named Henderson, whom Marcus had known for a decade, looked devastated. He walked into the conference room and sat down heavily. "Marcus," he said, "I saw the footage. Harris pulled it up. It's indefensible." "I know," Marcus said. "He escalated from 0 to 60 in 10 seconds. He didn't listen. He didn't look." "I'm firing him," Henderson said. "I'm initiating termination proceedings tonight. Conduct unbecoming civil rights violations incompetence. He's done." "That's a start," Marcus said. "But you and I both know Braden isn't the only problem. He felt comfortable doing that. He felt empowered. That's a training issue. That's a culture issue. If he does that to me, the city legal director, what is he doing to the kid who works at the grocery store? What is he doing to the mechanic? That's what scares me, Chief. I can fight back. They can't." Marcus stood up. He gathered his things. "I want the arrest report. I want the booking sheet labeled released, detention only. And I want to ride back to my car. I have a tire to change." The fallout was swift and absolute. Officer Kyle Braden was terminated following an expedited internal affairs investigation. The union didn't even fight it. The video was so damning that defending him would have been political suicide. The footage showed a calm, professional older man being screamed at by a hysterical officer who refused to acknowledge reality. It was viral gold, but the city kept it under seal as part of the settlement, though leaks are inevitable in this digital age. The city settled with Marcus Thorne for $450,000. It was a quick settlement. The city council didn't want a public trial where their own lawyer cross-examined their own police force. Marcus didn't buy a boat. He didn't upgrade his house. He took the check and deposited it into a new trust. He founded the Thorne Legal Defense Fund, a non-profit clinic designed to provide top-tier legal representation to indigent citizens who had been subjected to unlawful stops. He hired 2 young, hungry civil rights attorneys to run it. Braden left the state. Last anyone heard, he was working construction in Nevada, telling anyone who would listen that he got a raw deal, that he was just following procedure. But he knows the truth. He knows he let his bias blind him. 6 months later, Marcus was back in his office. He was looking over a file for a new case. A young man had been stopped for walking in the roadway and ended up tased. Marcus picked up his pen. Before this, he might have looked for ways to minimize the city's exposure. He might have looked for loopholes to defend the officer. Now he looked at the file differently. He saw the human being on the other side of the report. He picked up the phone and called the chief. "Chief, it's Marcus. We're not fighting this one. We're settling, and you need to retrain that sergeant." The system worked for Marcus Thorne because he was Marcus Thorne. He had the title, the knowledge, and the power. But his story serves as a mirror. It forces us to ask, what happens when it's not the legal director? What happens when it's you? As Marcus drove home that evening, passing the spot on Old Mill Road where he had knelt in the dirt, he didn't feel anger anymore. He felt a heavy responsibility. He had been given a glimpse of the jagged edge of the sword he had helped sharpen for years. And now he was going to spend the rest of his career making sure that sword didn't cut the innocent. Justice isn't just about laws. It's about the people enforcing them having the wisdom to see the difference between a criminal and a man fixing a flat tire. Thank you for reading this story. It's a heavy one, but necessary. What do you think? Should officers be required to carry personal liability insurance for cases like this? Or is the termination enough? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you believe in accountability, share this story. Let's keep the conversation going. Stay safe out there, folks.
Step out of the vehicle, now! Don't make this harder than it has to be.
I am compliant, I am unarmed, and this stop is unlawful.
Think you're above the law? Hands on the roof, now!
You are violating my constitutional rights, and every second is being
Turn around,
recorded.
you're under arrest.
Then understand this, officer. You just ended your career.
Evelyn had just left the drop-off line at the private magnet school where her grandchildren attended. She had hugged them goodbye, watched them walk safely through the double doors, and turned onto the main avenue to head toward the courthouse. She was due in chambers at 9:30 a.m. for a pretrial motion on a capital murder case. She was dressed in a charcoal gray tailored suit, her hair pulled back in an elegant professional bun. Her car, a silver Lexus, was immaculate. There was absolutely no reason for this stop. She knew the traffic code better than the officer walking toward her. She hadn't sped. She hadn't run a light. She had signaled her turn. "Keep your hands on the wheel," the officer shouted again as he approached the driver's side window. Evelyn complied. She placed her hands at the 10 and 2 positions, fingers spread wide. She knew the drill. She had taught this drill to her sons, her nephews, and now her grandsons. Don't move. Don't reach. Narrate your actions. It was a survival script that black families handed down like heirlooms, a grim necessity in a world where a misunderstanding could turn fatal in a heartbeat. But beneath her calm exterior, a cold fury was beginning to simmer. Officer Miller, a man who looked no older than 28 with a high and tight haircut and sunglasses that hid his eyes, was approaching her vehicle with the posture of a soldier entering a combat zone, not a public servant conducting a traffic stop. Before we dive deeper into this harrowing encounter, an encounter that would expose the rot inside a local precinct and end in a way no one expected, I need you to do something for me. Stop what you're doing and drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. Are you in the US? The UK, Canada? Let me know your state or country. And if you believe that no one is above the law, especially those sworn to enforce it, hit that subscribe button right now. You need to see how this ends because the woman sitting in that driver's seat is about to turn the tables in a way that Officer Miller never saw coming. Evelyn watched him in the side mirror. He touched the trunk of her car, a tactic to leave fingerprints and ensure the trunk was latched. He stopped at the C-pillar, staying slightly behind the driver's window to force her to turn her head, a tactical disadvantage for her. This wasn't a casual stop. He was hunting. "Roll the window down," Miller commanded. Evelyn pressed the button. The glass slid down smoothly. She didn't turn her body. She kept her hands on the wheel. She stared straight ahead, waiting for him to step into view. When he finally leaned down, the smell of chewing tobacco and aggressive cologne wafted into the car. "License and registration," he snapped, not offering a greeting, not identifying himself, and not stating the reason for the stop. Evelyn turned her head slowly to look at him. She saw the nameplate on his chest, K. Miller. She memorized it instantly. She looked at his body camera, noting the green light indicating it was recording. Good. "Officer," Evelyn said, her voice steady, possessing the controlled cadence of a woman who had commanded courtrooms for 2 decades. "I am going to comply with your request. However, my license is in my purse on the passenger seat and my registration is in the glove compartment. I am going to reach for them now." "Is that all right?" Miller sneered. "Just get the ID. Quit stalling." "I am not stalling, officer. I am informing you of my movements for your safety and mine. I am reaching for my purse now." She moved her right hand slowly, deliberately. She could feel his eyes on her, feel the tension radiating off him. He was coiled tight, looking for an excuse, looking for a reason to escalate. He had no idea that the woman he was treating like a street criminal had sent men to death row for less than what he was doing right now. He had no idea that the suspect he was harassing had literally written the county's guidelines on probable cause stops. To understand the magnitude of the mistake Officer Kyle Miller was making, you have to understand who Evelyn Vance was. In the legal community of the state, her name was synonymous with integrity and iron-willed justice. She wasn't just a prosecutor, she was an institution. She had started her career 30 years ago as a public defender fighting for the indigent before switching sides because she believed she could do more to fix the system from within. She had a reputation for being tough but fair. Defense attorneys respected her because she never hid evidence. Judges trusted her because she never made a frivolous argument. Police officers, the good ones, at least admired her because she knew how to build a case that would stick. She had spent thousands of hours reviewing police reports, watching dash-cam footage, and analyzing the split-second decisions officers had to make. She understood the job was dangerous. She defended officers when they were right, but she also prosecuted them when they were wrong. 2 years prior, she had secured a conviction against a corrupt deputy who had been planting drugs on teenagers. She knew the difference between a mistake and malice, and looking at Officer Miller, she was already categorizing his behavior. "Here is my license," Evelyn said, handing the plastic card to him through the window. "And here is the registration." Miller snatched them from her hand. He glanced at the license, then back at her, then down at the registration. He didn't look at the details. He was looking for something else. He was looking for fear. And he wasn't finding it. "Is this your vehicle, ma'am?" he asked, his tone dripping with skepticism. "The registration you are holding indicates that it is." Evelyn replied calmly. "It is registered to Evelyn J. Vance. That is me." "It's a nice car," Miller said, looking around the interior. "What do you do for a work? How do you afford a ride like this?" The question was illegal, or at the very least completely irrelevant to a traffic stop. It was a fishing expedition. He saw a black woman in a luxury vehicle in a wealthy school district and decided she didn't belong. He was trying to catch her in a lie, trying to find a thread he could pull to unravel her life. "Officer," Evelyn said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming the voice that made defendants squirm in their seats. "My employment is not relevant to this traffic stop. You have my identification. You have my registration. You have yet to tell me why you pulled me over." Miller stiffened. He wasn't used to pushback. He was used to compliance, to fear, to people begging for a warning. "I pulled you over because you were driving aggressively in a school zone," Miller lied. "You took off from that curb like a bat out of hell. Unsafe start. That's a ticketable offense." Evelyn almost laughed. "Almost. Officer, my vehicle has a digital telematics system that records my speed, acceleration, and braking patterns. I assure you I did not accelerate aggressively. I merged into traffic at under 15 miles per hour. The speed limit is 25. Miller's face flushed red. He realized he had stepped into a trap. He had made up a vague infraction, unsafe start, because it was subjective. It was his word against hers. But she had just told him there was data. Instead of backing down, however, Miller doubled down. This is a psychological phenomenon often seen in bad policing. When challenged, the ego takes over. He couldn't be wrong, so she had to be the problem. "Don't get smart with me." Miller snapped his hand, drifting closer to his holster. "I observed what I observed, and now I'm observing a driver with an attitude problem. Step out of the car." The command hung in the air. Pennsylvania v. Mims allows an officer to order a driver out of a vehicle during a lawful traffic stop for officer safety. But this stop wasn't lawful. It was a pretext, and the order wasn't for safety. It was for dominance. Miller wanted to humiliate her. He wanted to make her stand on the side of the road while parents she knew drove by. He wanted to exert control. Evelyn looked at him. She saw the rage behind his sunglasses. She saw a young man with a badge and a gun who was used to being the most powerful person in every room he entered. "Officer Miller," Evelyn said, "I am happy to wait here while you run my license. There is no safety reason for me to exit the vehicle. I am seated, my hands are visible, and I am compliant." "I said get out of the car," Miller shouted, stepping back and unbuttoning the retention strap on his holster. "Now, or I will drag you out for obstruction." Evelyn looked past him. 2 cars had slowed down. One was a minivan driven by the mother of one of her grandson's classmates. The woman was looking with wide eyes. She saw Evelyn Vance, the state prosecutor, being screamed at by a cop. The woman reached for her phone. "Good. Witnesses."
I am exiting the vehicle under duress, Evelyn stated clearly, directing her voice toward his body camera. I fear for my physical safety if I do not comply. I am not consenting to this search or this seizure. She unbuckled her seatbelt. She opened the door. She stepped out onto the asphalt, standing 5 feet 4 inches in her low heels, facing a man who towered over her. She smoothed her blazer. She didn't look at the ground. She looked him dead in the eye. "Turn around," Miller barked. "Hands on the roof." The morning air was cool, but the heat radiating from the asphalt and from the situation was stifling. Evelyn turned slowly, placing her manicured hands on the warm metal of her car's roof. She felt the vibration of a passing truck. She felt the eyes of the community on her back. This was the neighborhood where she had lived for 15 years. She knew the crossing guard. She knew the principal, and now she was spread-eagled against her car like a felon. "Spread your feet," Miller commanded, kicking the inside of her ankle with his boot. "That is unnecessary," Evelyn said sharply. "I am standing still. I am unarmed." "I'll decide what's necessary," Miller grunted. He began a pat-down. Legally, a Terry frisk requires reasonable suspicion that the subject is armed and dangerous. There was absolutely nothing in this interaction to suggest Evelyn was armed. She was a grandmother in a business suit. This was an assault. Miller's hands were rough, moving up her sides, patting down her blazer pockets. He was punishing her for her defiance. "Officer," Evelyn said, her face pressed near the car window, "you are conducting an illegal search. You have no articulable suspicion that I am armed. You are violating the Fourth Amendment, and you are stripping yourself of qualified immunity." Miller paused. The legal terminology penetrated his anger for a split second. Most people didn't talk about articulable suspicion or qualified immunity. They talked about rights in a vague sense, but this woman sounded like she was reading from a textbook. "You a lawyer or something?" Miller asked, his tone mocking but with a hint of uncertainty. "I am the Chief Assistant State Prosecutor for this district," Evelyn said, her voice cutting like a knife. "I prosecute felons, and I prosecute police officers who break the law. You are currently breaking the law." Miller froze. For a second, the world seemed to stop. If he had been a smarter man or a more experienced one, he would have stopped right there. He would have apologized, said he was just being careful and let her go. He could have salvaged his career. But Kyle Miller wasn't smart. He was proud. And in his mind, she was lying. There was no way this woman was a high-ranking prosecutor. Prosecutors were guys in cheap suits, or they were white men he saw at the precinct. This woman, she was just trying to scare him. "Yeah, right," Miller laughed, a harsh, nervous sound. "And I'm the police commissioner. You think you can lie to me impersonating a public official is a felony, lady. You just dug your hole deeper." "Check my wallet," Evelyn said. "My credentials are right behind my driver's license. The gold badge, the state ID, check it." Miller had the wallet in his hand. He hadn't even looked inside. He opened it now, flipping past the credit cards and the photos of her grandchildren. He saw the leather flap. He flipped it open. There it was. The gold shield of the state prosecutor's office. The photo ID next to it, Evelyn Vance, chief assistant. It was authentic. The weight of the badge, the holographic seal on the ID. It was undeniable. Miller stared at it. His brain tried to reject the information. He looked at the badge, then at the back of Evelyn's head. Panic began to rise in his chest, hot and acidic. But panic for a bully often looks like aggression. He couldn't back down now. The lady in the minivan was filming. Other cars had stopped. If he let her go now, he looked like a fool. He looked weak. He convinced himself it was fake. It had to be fake. "Nice prop," Miller scoffed, snapping the wallet shut. "Where'd you buy this online? You think a fake badge gives you a pass?" "Officer Miller," Evelyn said, and her voice was terrifyingly calm now. "That is state-issued identification. If you continue this, there will be no turning back. I am warning you as an officer of the court. Cease this action immediately." "You're done," Miller shouted, grabbing her left wrist. "You're under arrest." "For what?" Evelyn demanded, not resisting, but not making it easy. She kept her muscles rigid. "Impersonating an officer, obstruction, resisting arrest, disorderly conduct. Take your pick." Miller yanked her arm behind her back, twisting it painfully. The woman in the minivan, Mrs. Henderson, had stepped out of her car, now her phone held high. "Hey," she yelled. "That's Ms. Vance. She's a prosecutor. What are you doing?" Miller looked up, startled. "Back off!" he screamed at the witness. "Get back in your vehicle or you're next." "Mrs. Henderson," Evelyn called out, her voice clear. "Please keep recording. Do not intervene. Just record. Capture everything." "Shut up!" Miller shoved Evelyn against the car door. He pulled his handcuffs from his belt. The metallic ratchet sound of the cuffs closing around Evelyn's wrists echoed in the quiet morning street. It was the sound of a career ending, though Miller didn't know it yet. Evelyn Vance stood on the side of the road, her wrists bound behind her back in cold steel. The metal bit into her skin. She had sent hundreds of people to prison, but she had never worn handcuffs herself. The sensation was dehumanizing. It made her feel small, powerless. But she forced that feeling down. She needed her mind sharp. She began to catalog the sensations, the words, the timestamps in her head. 9:02 a.m. Arrested without probable cause. Excessive force used during handcuffing. Witness intimidation. Miller grabbed her by the upper arm, his fingers digging into her bicep. "Let's go," he grunted, marching her toward his patrol car. "I have items in my vehicle," Evelyn said. "My purse, my phone, my case files. Those files contain sensitive grand jury information. You cannot leave them unsecured." "I'm towing your car," Miller said dismissively. "It'll be inventory searched." "You do not have the authority to read those files," Evelyn warned. "They are privileged state documents. If you open a single folder, you are violating state secrecy laws." "I'll do what I want," Miller muttered. He opened the back door of his cruiser. The back seat was hard plastic designed to be easily hosed down. It smelled of stale vomit and industrial disinfectant. He shoved her inside. Evelyn had to duck awkwardly to avoid hitting her head. It was a move she had seen defendants make 1,000 times on video, a clumsy, forced entry into the cage. Miller slammed the door. The sound was final. Evelyn was trapped. She sat upright, leaning forward to relieve the pressure on her shoulders. Through the wire mesh that separated the front and back seats, she watched Miller walking back to her car. He didn't tow it. He got in the driver's seat. He was going to move it. No, he was searching it. She watched him riffle through her glove box. She saw him pick up her briefcase. He opened it. He flipped through the files marked confidential, homicide investigation. He was looking for drugs. He was looking for a weapon. He was looking for anything to justify the colossal mistake he was starting to suspect he had made. He found nothing. Just legal briefs, court orders, and a Bible. He threw the briefcase back onto the seat, frustration evident in his body language. He walked back to his cruiser, his face a mask of angry confusion. He got in the front seat and slammed his door. He didn't look at her. He didn't turn around. He jammed the car into gear. "You are making a mistake, officer," Evelyn said from the back. "You have the right to remain silent." Miller recited quickly, mechanically. "So use it." "I am fully aware of my rights under Miranda," Evelyn said. "I am also aware of yours. You have the right to a union representative during an internal affairs interrogation. You're going to need one." Miller cranked up the radio. He drowned her out with the squawk of dispatch and the noise of static. He was trying to block her out, trying to pretend she was just another loudmouth he'd pulled off the street. But his hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Evelyn saw it. The adrenaline dump was wearing off, and the cold reality was setting in. He drove fast, too fast, heading toward the precinct. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment.
She thought about the motion hearing she was missing. The judge would be furious. Her office would be in a panic. When she didn't show up, they would call her cell. Her cell was in her purse in her car, which Miller had left parked illegally on the side of the road near the school. "Officer," Evelyn said, raising her voice over the radio, "you left my vehicle unsecured on a public roadway. It contains sensitive state evidence. That is a dereliction of duty." Miller didn't answer. He just stared straight ahead. He was in deep water, and he was just starting to realize he couldn't swim. The drive to the precinct took 15 minutes. It felt like 15 hours. Evelyn spent the time breathing deeply, lowering her heart rate. She needed to be the calmest person in the room when they arrived. She knew the precinct. She knew the layout. She knew the people. Miller pulled into the Sallyport, the secure garage where prisoners were unloaded. The heavy metal door rolled down behind them, sealing them inside the concrete box. Miller got out and opened her door. "Out," he said. His voice had lost some of its edge. It sounded thinner now. Evelyn stepped out. Her legs were stiff. "Officer, these cuffs are extremely tight. I am losing circulation in my left thumb." "Standard procedure," Miller mumbled. He took her arm, but his grip was looser now. He walked her toward the intake door. He swiped his keycard. The buzzer sounded, and they walked into the processing area. The smell of the precinct was familiar to Evelyn coffee floor wax and sweat. It was the smell of her workplace, essentially. But usually she entered through the front doors wearing a visitor's badge, shaking hands. Today she was entering through the back in chains. They walked up to the booking desk. Sitting behind the high counter was Sergeant Tom Kowalski. Evelyn knew Tom. They had worked together on the McRae murder trial 3 years ago. Tom was a good cop, old school by the book, tired of the nonsense. He was typing on a computer, sipping from a styrofoam cup. "What you got, Miller?" Kowalski asked without looking up. Another speeder who talked back. "Interfering with an investigation, impersonating an official, resisting," Miller recited, trying to sound authoritative. She had a fake badge, claimed to be a prosecutor. Kowalski stopped typing. He looked at the paperwork Miller slapped on the counter. Then he looked up at the prisoner. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens when a bomb drops but hasn't exploded yet. Kowalski's eyes went wide. His jaw literally dropped. He stood up slowly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Miller," Kowalski said, his voice a hoarse whisper. What did you do?" "She wouldn't listen," Miller said defensively. "She had this fake ID." "Fake ID," Kowalski roared. "You moron! That's Evelyn Vance. That's the chief assistant state prosecutor." Miller blinked. He looked from Kowalski to Evelyn. Evelyn stood tall, her chin raised. She looked at Kowalski. "Hello, Sergeant," she said coolly. "I believe Officer Miller has made a significant error in judgment. Could you please remove these handcuffs?" Miller stepped back. The color drained from his face completely. He looked like a ghost. "Wait, she's real." "Real," Kowalski came around the desk. "She signs your overtime checks, you idiot." "She puts away the guys who shoot at us." Kowalski didn't wait for the key. He grabbed a pair of bolt cutters from the wall, usually used for stubborn locks, but then realized he needed the key. He snatched the key ring from Miller's paralyzed hand. "Uncuff her! Now!" Kowalski ordered, shoving the keys back at Miller. Miller's hands were shaking so badly he couldn't get the key in the hole. He fumbled, dropping the keys on the floor. "Get away." Kowalski shoved him aside. The sergeant picked up the keys and unlocked the cuffs himself. "Ms. Vance, I am so sorry. I don't know what he was thinking." Evelyn rubbed her wrists. There were deep red indentations where the metal had been. She looked at Miller. He was pressed against the wall, looking like a child who had just broken an expensive vase. "Sergeant," Evelyn said, her voice businesslike, I need you to secure Officer Miller's body camera footage immediately. I want the dashcam video pulled. And I want the dispatch logs. Do not let him touch a computer. Do not let him leave this room. Yes, ma'am, Kowalski said. He picked up his radio. Captain, you need to come down to booking, now, and bring the lieutenant. It's a code red. The atmosphere in the precinct shifted instantly. It went from a lazy Tuesday morning to a full-blown crisis. Officers who had been chatting by the coffee machine stopped and stared. They saw the chief prosecutor rubbing her wrists, standing next to a pale, trembling Officer Miller. Captain Reynolds appeared in the doorway 2 minutes later. He was a large man, close to retirement, who hated surprises. When he saw Evelyn, he closed his eyes briefly, as if praying this was a hallucination. Ms. Vance, Reynolds said, walking over quickly. Please tell me this isn't what it looks like. It is exactly what it looks like, Captain, Evelyn said. I was profiled. I was unlawfully stopped. I was ordered out of my vehicle without cause. I was assaulted. I was kidnapped, and I was brought here in handcuffs. Reynolds turned to Miller. His face was a mask of fury. Miller, my office, now. Give me your badge and your gun. But, sir, Miller stammered. She was aggressive. She wouldn't answer my questions. Badge, gun! Reynolds screamed. It was a sound that echoed down the hallway. Miller slowly unbuckled his gun belt. He placed his Glock on the counter. He unpinned his badge. He looked naked without them. He looked just like a 28-year-old man who had ruined his life in under an hour. Go sit in the conference room, Reynolds ordered. Don't talk to anyone. Don't touch your phone. As Miller walked away, head down, Evelyn spoke up. Captain, I need to make a call. I'm late for court. Use my office, Reynolds said. Anything you need. Evelyn walked into the captain's office. She sat in his leather chair. She picked up the phone and dialed the district attorney, her boss. Robert, she said when he answered. It's Evelyn. I'm at the 4th precinct. No, I'm not visiting. I was arrested. Yes. By one of our own. No, I'm fine. But we have a problem. A big one. Within 20 minutes, the district attorney arrived. So did the police chief. The precinct was swarming with brass. Evelyn sat in the conference room holding an ice pack to her wrist. She had refused medical attention, but the bruising was already forming. She recounted the story in detail. She didn't exaggerate. She didn't need to. The facts were damning enough. He said I accelerated aggressively, Evelyn said. My car logs will prove that is a lie. He said I was resisting. The video will prove that is a lie. He said my ID was fake. That was just incompetence. The police chief, a man named Henderson, no relation to the witness, looked sick. Evelyn, we will handle this. We will throw the book at him. I don't just want him fired, Chief, Evelyn said. I want to know how he got this far. I want to know his history, because he didn't learn that behavior this morning. He's been doing this, and I want to know who let him get away with it. Kowalski knocked on the door. He entered holding a tablet. Ms. Vance, Captain, we pulled the footage. You need to see this. They gathered around the tablet. The video played. They saw the stop. They heard Miller's aggression. They heard Evelyn's calm responses. They heard the unsafe start lie. But then they heard something Miller had muttered under his breath as he walked back to his cruiser with her license, something Evelyn hadn't heard at the time. On the video, Miller looked at her license and muttered, "Affirmative action hire. Probably stole the car." The room went dead silent. The racism wasn't just implied anymore. It was recorded. It was explicit. Well, the district attorney said, breaking the silence, that's a hate crime enhancement. The next 4 hours were a blur of bureaucratic machinery turning against one of its own. Usually, the blue wall of silence protects officers. But the wall crumbles when the victim is the one person the police need to do their jobs. The prosecutors and the police are a team. Miller had attacked the quarterback. Evelyn's car was retrieved by a senior detective. Her files were secured. The witness, Mrs. Henderson, sent her video to the station. It corroborated everything. Miller was formally suspended without pay pending investigation. He was escorted out of the building through the back door wearing civilian clothes, his head covered by a hoodie. He was no longer an officer of the law. He was a liability. Evelyn sat with the chief and the DA. They were drafting a press release. They wanted to get ahead of the story. "We can say it was a misunderstanding," the chief suggested weakly. "No," Evelyn said firmly. "We will tell the truth. We will say that an officer violated department policy and the law. We will say that racial profiling will not be tolerated. If you try to spin this, Chief, I will sue the department myself, and I will win." The chief nodded. He knew she was right. "Okay, we do it your way." But the real work was just beginning. Evelyn requested Miller's personnel file. She wanted to see his stop data. Under the Brady rule, prosecutors must disclose evidence favorable to the defense, including information about dishonest cops. Evelyn had a suspicion that Miller had a history. She was right. A review of Miller's 3-year career showed a disturbing pattern. He had an unusually high number of resisting arrest charges. 80% of his traffic stops involved black or Hispanic drivers, despite the precinct being 60% white. He had 5 citizen complaints for rudeness and excessive force. All of them had been marked unsubstantiated by his previous supervisor. "This is systemic," Evelyn told the DA as they reviewed the files that evening. "Miller is the symptom. The supervision is the disease. He was taught that this was okay because nobody ever stopped him." "We're going to have to review every case he's ever touched," the DA said, rubbing his temples. "Every arrest, every ticket. If he lied about you, a chief prosecutor, what did he do to the kid who works at the grocery store, or the single mom who couldn't afford a lawyer?" "Exactly," Evelyn said. "I want a full audit, and I want Miller decertified. He never wears a badge again. Not here, not in the next county, not anywhere." That night, Evelyn finally went home. Her husband was waiting for her. He hugged her, holding her tight. He had seen the news. The story had leaked. "Prosecutor arrested," was the headline. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I am," Evelyn said. She looked at her wrists. The red marks were turning purple. "But I'm angry, and I'm going to use it." The fallout was swift and brutal. The internal affairs investigation, usually a slow process, was completed in record time. The video evidence was incontrovertible. The audio of the racial slur sealed Miller's fate. Kyle Miller was fired 3 weeks later. The review board found him guilty of false arrest, excessive force filing a false report, and conduct unbecoming an officer. But Evelyn didn't stop there. She pressed for decertification. The State Police Standards Council stripped Miller of his law enforcement certification. He was effectively blacklisted from policing in the United States. The audit of Miller's past cases was a disaster for the department. 22 convictions were overturned because they relied solely on Miller's word. The city had to pay out settlements to people who had been wrongly arrested. Evelyn filed a civil rights lawsuit against the city and the police department. She didn't do it for the money. She did it to force a consent decree. The city settled for $1.2 million to avoid a public trial that would have aired all their dirty laundry. Evelyn took the $1.2 million and established the Vance Legal Defense Fund. It was a clinic designed to provide top-tier legal representation to indigent people who claimed they were victims of police misconduct. She hired young, hungry lawyers and taught them everything she knew. 6 months later, Evelyn was back in the courtroom. She was prosecuting a murder case. The detective on the stand was being cross-examined. He was nervous. He knew who Evelyn was. He knew what happened to officers who lied to her. He testified with absolute precision and honesty. The culture in the district had changed. Officers knew that the chief prosecutor wasn't just a suit in an office. She was a survivor of their worst instincts. They walked straighter. They turned their cameras on. They thought twice before making a pretext stop. On a rainy Tuesday 1 year after the incident, Evelyn drove past the school drop-off. She saw a police cruiser pulling over a car. She slowed down. She watched. The officer approached the window. He was polite. He introduced himself. He explained the stop. There was no hand on the gun. There was no screaming. Evelyn smiled. It wasn't perfect. The system was still flawed. Racism hadn't vanished. But in her corner of the world, things were better. Because she had stood her ground. She drove on, heading toward the courthouse, ready to do the work of justice. This story ends with a victory, but it leaves us with a haunting question. Evelyn Vance survived and triumphed because she was powerful. She had the badge, the knowledge, and the connections. But what about the people who don't? What happens when Officer Miller pulls over a nurse, a construction worker, or a student? Justice shouldn't depend on who you know or what title you hold. It should be the default. Evelyn's story is a reminder that we must watch the watchers. We must hold the line, because if they can do it to a prosecutor, they can do it to anyone. Thank you for reading this story. It's a heavy one, but an important one. If this story moved you, please share it. Let's keep the conversation going. Do you think the punishment for Officer Miller was enough? What would you have done in Evelyn's shoes? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that shine a light on the truth. Stay safe out there, folks.